So everyone, please make sure your mics are turned on and change your names to your full name with your ZID. And just a reminder that this event will be recorded for people who are unable to attend. And yeah, just again, a reminder to fill in the attendance form. So before we begin, I would like to offer an acknowledgement of country and pronouns. First, I would like to acknowledge the Bedegal and Gadigal people whose land UNSW resides on. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and pay my respects to any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people here with us. Secondly, I just wanted to let you know that my preferred gender pronouns are she, her, and please share your own if you are comfortable doing so. I'll now pass it on to Vivian to introduce Women in Technology.
Thank you. So I'm Vivian. I'm one of the careers directors at WIT this year. Just before I get started, so a bit about our society. UNSW Women in Tech is a society of both women and men that advocates for emerging women in the tech industry. After being founded in 2016 and now having evolved into a growing platform of over 3,000 students, we encompass a broad range of various disciplines and university stages. Our ultimate aim is to facilitate a smoother transition from university to professional life and cultivate empowered future leaders within the STEM sector. I'll pass it back to Angela to introduce DigiSoc and kick off the workshop.
Thank you, Vivian. Hi, I'm Angela, and I'm one of the education subcommittee members at DigiSoc this year. DigiSoc aims to empower students interested in all things digital. Lying at the intersection of business, design, and technology, DigiSoc is the premier student society focusing on allowing all students, regardless of their degree, to learn more about digital strategy, UX UI design, and innovation. We're very lucky today to be joined by our special guest from Figma, Miguel Cardona. Miggie was previously an assistant professor for the Bachelor and Master of Finance programs at the Rochester Institute of Technology and the lead designer of ImGix, a responsive image API startup in San Francisco. Altogether, he has 18 years of experience in teaching, designing, interactions, web development, and product design. And today he'll be taking us through just a couple of the many techniques he knows in Figma. Without further ado, I will now hand it off to Miggie to start us off.
Brilliant. How you doing? And thanks you everybody for joining. My name is Miguel Cardona. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm currently based in the United States, Rochester, New York. So before we get started, what I'm going to do is share my screen. Oh, I can't share my screen currently. It says disabled screen sharing. Someone could just give me access.
Yeah, I'll just look at that now.
Yeah, you should have permission now.
I should have permission now. Thank you so much.
Yes, all good.
All right, awesome. Can everyone see my screen right now? It says welcome everyone. Y'all can see that? All right, cool. So we're going to get started with just a little bit of an icebreaker. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that this is where it needs to be. Let me make sure it should be. Here we go. There's our little team that I just made for everyone. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to hit share. I'm going to start an open session. So this is FigJam. And let me make sure I get a link so we can all work together in this space. I'm going to drop it in the chat. So the link is in the chat. You can join me in this file. You don't even need a Figma account to join me. And what we're going to do is just have like a little bit of warm up. We're going to do some warm up doodles. So can everyone access that? It's in the chat link. Click on the link I'm sharing. Are y'all able to access that? There we go. All right. Now I'm seeing people. Cool. We got a bunch of anonymous visitors. Got Allison in the house. Let's see. All right, cool. So what you're going to do is you're going to join me in here. This is FigJam. This is a whiteboard tool. We're going to use this as our gateway into Figma, where our document resides. A couple quick things. So we are in here just to kind of get a sense of the collaboration. So the first things first, if you want to chat, hit the / and say, hey. And if you put in a lot of exclamation points, you'll see that expand out. So it's the / key. You can also press right click on your canvas and choose cursor chat right there. So you can say hello. So I see Mark, you're in here, Jaden, you're in here. So feel free to say hello. Emotes, when you press the E key, you can click either this little stamp or this little face up here, and you can drop in some emotes. So we're going to kick it off with a little bit of emotion, a little bit of feels. I know I can't be there with you, but we can let our presence be known. So even here, like little waves. If you press the E key again, you'll notice there's a little stamp that's underneath it. So press the E key, click on that little stamp, and you could actually drop out little stamps right onto the canvas. So you could drop little hearts, little thumbs ups, little +1s, little stars, little question marks, little thumbs, little stickers. All right, cool. So a couple quick things to navigate around the space. You may be familiar, but in the event that you're not, hold down the space bar and you can drag and move around the space. You can also kind of scroll in and zoom out. If you're on a laptop, you can use the pinch to zoom, but if you're using a mouse, if you hit Command and your scroll bar on your mouse, you can zoom in and out. Yeah, so I'm using the native one, but you can access via the web. So as long as you have this link, you can join me. Like just hop right in, click on that link. You should be able to join. There should be no restriction. All right, cool. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to put 4 minutes on the clock, maybe 5, and we're going to do little warm-up doodles. So I'm going to show you, if you look down here, there's the marker tool. You can click on the marker tool. There's a highlighter tool. There's even washi tape that you can drop in. And what we're going to do is I'm going to have you all draw your favorite animal. So you can use the marker tool. You'll notice that there's like a thicker brush, a thinner brush. There's a number of colors over here. And if you want to pick a custom color, you can go ahead and pick the custom color picker right there. So I'm going to put about, in this little time, I'm going to put, let's see, timer. Let's start off with about 5 minutes. I'm going to put 5 minutes on the timer. So it's set by Miggie from Figgie right there. And there's 5 minutes on the clock. And what you can do is just drop your name in. I'm going to double click. I'm going to put my name in and I'm going to join you in a little round of draw an animal. So please feel free to join us in this document. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to copy that link once more. Make sure you join us in this doc. We're going to draw little animals. So I'm going to begin. I'm going to use this pencil. And, I'm actually going to do a little crab. There we go. So I'm going to draw a little crab. So I want y'all to get comfortable with the idea of creative collaboration. And that's what we're doing here today. Having a little drawn animal contest. Right. So you will not be, you can do this on the iPad app. There is no way to edit this on a phone or a or non-native the iPad app, but you can actually use this in the iPad app. Chesta, who just asked me in a private. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to make this little crab right here. And yeah, so there's a Figma for iPad app. And with that, you can actually draw natively with the actual app and actually use the pencil. And fun fact, when you use the pencil, there's like a little undo. So I'm going to draw my little crab here. There's about 3 minutes on the clock, so no need to rush through your animal. But I'm just going to draw a little king crab here. It's going to have a little crown, or queen crab, doesn't matter. It's a ruler crab. Actually, that's really funny. So what I'll do is I'll just put like little ruler. It's a benevolent ruler. There we go. There's a little ruler. And then I'm also gonna give them, let's see, another little set of legs there. All right, cool. So let's see how everybody is doing. Ooh, Angela, I'm feeling that giraffe. Hannah, that is a beautiful fish. It looks like it's like a guppy. Emily, that's a beautiful duck. Ooh, over here, holes. I'm really feeling that. Adorable cat. Allison actually looks like my cat. My cat Eartha. Oh my God. All right, I can never pronounce these things right. It's the ocelot. And then a blobfish. So that's a blobfish out of water. Blobfishes in water with the appropriate pressure don't look anything like that. They actually look quite majestic. It's like, how would we look under that much pressure in water? All right, Panda Bear, I'm really feeling this. All right, for those of you just joining us, please feel free to drop in to this document, warm up with us. We're just having a little bit of fun and seeing how we are going. Quack. All right, cool. So I'm just going to draw little stars. I'm going to give y'all stars. Oh man, it's a sad looking lizard, or a very serious looking lizard. Well, Hannah, you get a star. Allison, you get a star. Give myself a star. And if you click and hold on the little star, it'll kind of grow. All right. Nice job, everyone. So in just a moment, we're going to head over to Figma. I at least just wanted y'all to get a sense of this space. Remember, in Figma, you can also use cursor chat. The way that you navigate around and the way that you can kind of like manipulate things on a canvas, usually like doing a little bit of FigJam. It's great for prototyping, or not prototyping, what was I going to say? Like brainstorming and like working with others before you kind of like hop in, even for drawing up wireframes. So one cool thing, and while you're drawing, if you hold down the shift key, you can actually draw straight lines. So imagine yourself drawing like a little box or something. You can get some straight lines, even 45-degree angles. Look at this. I'm doing like a little isometric style box there. So if you hold down that shift key, right, there you go. You get some nice straight lines, which is actually really good for wireframes and ideating just a little bit there. Somebody drawn the little S. What is it? The like high school S. I don't know if y'all have it where you're at. All right, cool. So Tom is up, but oh, I'm feeling it. All right, cool. The Oxy, the Oshalots, Allison. All right, y'all doing a fantastic job. I really appreciate you. Thank you for participating. We all deserve a nice round of applause. So round of applause. Cool. So y'all feeling warmed up? Are you ready to go? Let's get going. All right. So down here, now at this point, right? So we've all participated. You need a Figma account to view the next part. Otherwise, you'll be only a viewer, and that's totally okay. Just feel free to sit back and watch the demo so you can kind of like learn some of the process. Remember, this is going to be recorded, but if you do want to join in the document, you will need to be using your Figma account. So let me just go ahead. I'm going to check my share. Anyone with the link can edit. So you should be able to join us here. Once again, in that warm-up document, it's down here, that FigJam file. I can also get a link. So let me copy a link. I could see that Jaden has joined, so I did things correctly. I'm going to just drop in the link right here. And I'm also going to drop the link. Let me do this. There we go. I dropped the link and it's also clickable. I'm also going to add it right over there in the chat. So you can also follow me here. So this is Figma Fundamentals, Figma 101. I'm your host, Miggie from Figma. I'm a designer advocate at Figma for education. So what that means is I work with other educators and students to kind of, you know, learn how to use Figma, how to get the best out of collaboration and get a better experience and learn. All right, cool. So I could see that a number of you have already joined me in this file. If I take a look, you all have edit access. However, I just ask that you just be respectful of this document, be respectful of one another in this space, and that by joining me in this space, you know, you're abiding by our code of conduct, which fundamentally be kind to one another, be kind to me as your host. And cool. So I'm going to go over a few things. One thing that I am going to note is that my file is probably going to be a little bit wonky because I haven't installed all of my fonts yet in this file. So we'll probably be having a similar experience. But a couple of things I want to note is that Figma is fully free for education. So you can sign up for Figma. You can verify your education status. So whatever school you're at. And then you just got to create an education team. So the file that I'm currently in right now, if you look at my screen share, you'll see I'm going to hop back out. This is an education team. And in an education team, you create new team. As long as you're verified for education, you can create a new team. And then within the team, you can have projects. And within the projects, you will have your files, and that's where we currently are. So we're inside of a file that's inside of a project. All right, so for today's agenda, I'm gonna do a brief intro to Figma. Well, we kind of did a warm up already. I'm gonna get into some tool and design basics. I'm gonna get into a little bit of like layout and grid. We're gonna talk about components, variants, a bit of auto layout, and hopefully have the opportunity to prototype. This is going to be a very, very kind of like crash course. And so I'm going to try to like go through as many of these concepts as quickly as possible, but as clearly as possible. So you can at least review the recording so you can kind of go through some of that. All right, couple quick things. I mentioned navigating the canvas, hold down the space bar and drag. You can 2-finger drag on your touchpad. Zooming in and out, there's a number of different ways that you can do that. When you hold down the command key, you can hit command plus or command minus. That'll allow you to zoom in and out. You can also pinch the touchpad, or you can hold the command key. Let me actually adjust this. I'm going to make a little live edit right here. You can also hold on Windows. It's the control key. So pretty much anytime that I mention the command key, it's pretty much going to map to the control key on Windows. So if I hold that command key and I scroll, you'll see that it changes my scroll to scrolling in and out. Okay, a couple other things that you can do if you want to zoom into a defined space. If you press and hold that zoom key, if you take a look at my screen, you can see that I'm zoomed out. And if I hold the zoom key, I could draw a little box and then I can see exactly where I'm zooming. So likewise, I can hold Option Z and I could actually draw and it'll like zoom out. And anytime you Option Z, if you're on Windows, it's going to be Alt Z. It'll allow you to zoom out. So if anything, you want to have mastery over some of these zooming values. Okay. Also, I'm going to mention observation mode. If I click up here, I can actually choose Spotlight, and Spotlight will give you all the prompt to follow me. So you can go ahead and you can follow me in that way. So even now I can see I have 8 followers. So as I move around the screen and or prototype, you will be able to see exactly where I'm at as I'm dragging around the space. All right, so a couple quick things, interface basics. Anytime you hear me mention the Figma toolbar, it is going to be on the upper left-hand corner. So you'll see here, there's like the main menu. It might be a little bit different if you're viewing on the web, but it's not going to be crazy different. So here you can kind of move. This is the main tool that you'll use to move around the screen, the move tool. Later on, I will be mentioning the scale tool. It's actually kind of hidden under here. So oftentimes people's biggest question is like, how do I scale things in a way that's intuitive? It's actually a separate tool. It's called the scale tool. It's the K key. That's where it's located. The frames are going to be just like artboards and any other application. Over here, you have shapes. I'm going to go through a bunch of those shapes and show you some magic with those shapes that's kind of nested inside. Also, here's the option for placing an image. You'll see here the pencil tool, pen tool. If you're familiar with pen tools in Illustrator, it's like that, in some ways better. And then you also have the text tool. So when you hover over many of these, you will see the shortcut keys for that. But speaking of shortcut keys, I'm going to go over the #1 shortcut that you need to know in Figma. So even if you've used Figma before, you might be unfamiliar with the quick actions menu. So what I'm going to do is hit either Command / or Control / on Windows. Also, I recognize that there's a lot of international audience members here today. So the international keyboard shortcut for that is going to be Command P or Control P, since, you know, the / may be unavailable to you. So what I'm going to do is press Command P, and you'll see this little menu pop up on my screen. So it says search menus, commands, and plugins. With this quick action menu, you can trigger any number of features that you want in Figma. So place image, if you want to, let's say, view all the keyboard shortcuts. So I'm going to type in Command / right? If I type in place image, as soon as I start typing in those words, it does like a fuzzy search for that action. So what I can do is type in keyboard shortcuts, and what that's going to provide me is this nice little window down at the bottom of the screen that's going to allow me to browse a number of keyboard shortcuts. And for me, because I'm using a brand new computer as of today, I haven't even triggered them all. Normally I've triggered them all, but as you trigger them, so if I was to press Shift P, right, you'll see it'll highlight, and then it becomes this like little mini game to see if you could trigger all of the shortcuts in Figma. So if I go instead to the pen tool and I press the P key, you will then see in my shortcut key pane that has then been highlighted. So what's great about this is it allows you to kind of find, a number of those different functions that you have available. Okay, so quickly, every time I mention the layers palette, it's going to be over on the left. Everything in the center area is the canvas. So when things are added to the canvas, you will see their representation kind of stacked up over here on the layers panel to the right. I've already kind of gone through the share menu just a little bit. What it is going to allow you to invite others into your document. It'll allow you to see who is in your document. It'll allow you to see who has edit or view access in a document. It'll allow you to even self-identify as the owner. So in the event that, you need to like kick somebody from your file for whatever reason, or just change their permissions or invite them, this will be the space to do it. Also, one thing that I will note, file functions. So maybe at the end of this workshop, you want a copy of this file for yourselves. Up here, you'll see this little arrow that will allow you to do a number of functions that are like kind of file specific. So you can duplicate this entire file. You can rename the file. You can like go to a particular project. You can move to a project. So any kind of file actions that you're going to be performing are going to be tucked away in this menu up at the top. When we start getting into prototyping, the quickest way to toggle between the prototype and the design menu is going to be Shift E. And what that's going to do is over here on the right, you're going to see that I'm currently in the design panel. When I press Shift E, I'm then in the prototype panel. Anytime you're designing on the canvas, you're creating something new, you're working in frames, that's going to be the design mode. Anytime you're fundamentally adjusting or working through interactions, that's going to be in prototype mode. And anytime you're going to be inspecting the graphics and you're looking through specifications for developer handoff, that's what this inspect mode is for right here, to help you get a sense of, like what are some of the properties and values of the things that you're designing, so they can eventually be built in a mobile app or website. Over here on the right too, I didn't even mention the properties panel. Properties panel's gone. Let me highlight that. So let me draw a little rectangle. I'm going to take a screenshot. Let's just do this live, just adding to this document here. So the one thing too, let me move this over. Boom. Look at this. Let me crop that. And the properties panel over here on the right is basically anytime you have an object. Let me put a little outline on that. Let me round those corners a bit too. So anytime you have an object and you select an object and you want to change its properties, so like let's say you have a rectangle, you want to make it red, you want to round its corners, you select the rectangle and then the properties will show up over on the right hand side, allowing you to kind of change those properties. So let's get right to it. So let's hop over here and let's do a little demo space. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab that text, bring it down here. I'm going to use the scale tool to make that really big. And I'm going to call this our demo area. So the first things first, what we're going to do is create a frame. Okay, so the first thing I see Brianna, Holly, Jade, and y'all joining me over here. I'm going to press the F key. Right, so the F key, and I'm going to draw a frame onto the canvas. So go ahead, draw a frame. Make sure, you got some space to draw it. You don't have to be directly on top of me. So draw a frame, any size, see what it is. Okay, as you draw it, you'll see the dimensions that are like coming up underneath it. So right now, this is about 982 by 1853. It's kind of big. So if you want to get a sense of proportion, if you know the device that you're designing for, select the frame and then come over here on the right and you'll see this little pane that will give you a bunch of presets. Now, the presets that are available here, like if I choose iPhone 13 Pro, okay, what that's going to do is that's going to provide me a frame that is set to the viewport size of a device. Right now, whenever you're designing, you always want to make sure that you're designing to the viewport size and not to anything larger. Otherwise, your type size and a lot of your proportions are going to be off. One of my biggest beefs with Adobe Illustrator is that all of their templated presets are based on physical dimensions of a device, and as such, type size is going to be rendered incorrectly. correctly. So whenever you're speccing out a brand new device, you always want to use its viewport dimensions, right? So look up viewport size. So every device here, so if I'm choosing iPhone 13, right, a Surface Pro 8, an iPad Pro 12.9 inch, right? All of those dimensions are going to be the designated viewport for that device. So its physical dimensions might actually be larger, but you always want to design to that. So then this way your type, scale, and a lot of your values are going to be one-to-one in the way that the developer may see it, the way that it'll be represented in CSS. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to set that back to iPhone 13 Pro. Cool. So now that I have a frame, we're going to talk a little bit about just dropping in some shapes and like what that means. So you'll notice a lot of the shapes are over here. We have rectangle, line, arrow, ellipse, polygon. The UX designer's favorite shape is going to be the rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to draw a rectangle in my frame. One other thing too, I'm going to change the name of my frame so it's easily identifiable as mine. I'm just going to double click on the frame name. And we'll put in, Miggie's first frame, and feel free to name it whatever you want. Make sure that, it's identified to you and that you got a little bit of space. So when I add this rectangle into the frame, you'll notice now on the layers panel, like wherever your frame might be, it's now nested inside. So that means that the rectangle is inside. So if I were to drag it outside, it's on the canvas, right? If I drag it inside, now it's nested inside of that frame. And that means a lot because this whole kind of like nesting pattern is going to be really important the more that you get into designing here. Okay, so I'm going to do a couple more things here. I'm going to change some of these properties. So if I click on this rectangle, I can adjust its radius. You'll see over here, all of these properties are going to be easily identifiable. So what I'm going to do is in my screen share, I'm going to select this frame. I'm going to come over here. And when I select this rectangle, I want y'all to be like astutely aware of these properties. So like the width of the rectangle would be like 320, right? Like the height, I could set it to, let's say like 240. Or if I want to be perfectly square, it could be 320. So now the placement of it is fundamentally going to be guided by the X and Y position, right? And other properties that I can change of this rectangle are going to be like the fill color. So if I want to make it like a little bit darker, I can make it a little bit redder, I can make it a little bit bluer. So those properties you can begin to change that way. So this is probably fairly familiar to many of you. Now, if I was to create a few more of these, let's say actually I make this, a bit shorter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate it, right? And I'm going to duplicate it by holding down the Option key. So let's say this, oh, my text is way too big. Let's put in a little note for ourselves. Actually, I'm going to steal a note from FigJam. Let me copy my FigJam notes, and here, to duplicate, hold down the option, can't spell today, Option key, or Alt on Windows. If you're on a Chromebook, it's the search key. So Chromebook, it's the search key, right? So what we're going to do is when you hold down the Option key, you can duplicate, you can have like a bunch of these. So I'm going to show you a couple other cool things with that. When I hold down the Option key, I can drag it. And as you see me dragging it, right, you can actually see the spacing between it, right? So I can get that sense of space. If I want to change and make sure that it's snapping, I can hit Command / and I could type in the word snap, and I can see here snap to pixel grid. For me, it's turned off. However, I want to turn it back on. So I could see my geometry snap is turned on, my object snap is turned on, but I want to snap this to the pixel grid. So what's cool about that was as I drag this, let me make sure this is on a nice even value. All right, let's see, 132. There we go. So now as I duplicate this, right, you'll get a nice even number, right? You'll see that even number kind of like smooth out. All right, cool. Everyone seems to be following suit. So one cool thing about that is if I option drag it, I can hit Command D, 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 and it'll continue to duplicate. So like I can easily Command Z to undo. So fun little activity. Let's try this. Hold on the Option key and then hit Command D, 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 D. DDD. I'm coming up on Jaden's frame right there. DDD, right? And it's just like adding all of those extra ones. So that's the Command D function. And I'm just going to undo it by hitting Command Z. All right, so a couple other things here. I'm just going to show you a couple other quick shapes. The ellipse tool is kind of amazing in that there's a little arc. So what you can actually do is get somewhat of like a pie graph, and also you can adjust its ratio property from the sensor, which allows you to create these pretty interesting kind of like activity bar type visuals. Any of the other shapes that you're trying to generate. So there's a polygon tool here, which will allow you to create additional points. So I can actually go all the way up to like a 60 count polygon, which is basically like a circle, but it'll allow you to generate these values. So I can have like a hexagon, and then I can even round out those corners. So then also lastly, the star tool, let's say you need to make a star tool for like a star icon, you're making like a ratings app. I can actually increase the count. I can kind of change that ratio and I can add like a bit of a radius. So can kind of like add and manipulate that as well. So a lot of people kind of overlook these tools, but I guarantee you that they are powerful. Likewise, you can also add strokes to these values. So I can go ahead and add like a stroke value and increase that and put that in the center. Cool. How are we doing? Are there any questions before I continue? Questions? Okay, cool. So next up, let's get into layout. So let's say I want to lay this out and I want to add images to that, or if I'm creating a wireframe of some sort. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my frame. So I'm in my frame, and you'll notice over here to the right is a layout grid. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a layout grid. Now, what's really cool about the layout grid tool is that to me, it's one of the most versatile that I've used across many of the different design applications. And I'll show you why. So here, what I can do with this layout grid is I can fundamentally choose to demonstrate, like, let's say the column view. So if you're interested in learning more about this, I would highly recommend looking at the material design style guideline, specifically how they represent grids. There's a very good breakdown on the intentionality of those grids, and I can probably do an entire 2-hour talk on grids alone. However, what I'm going to do is basically just do a count of 4. And whenever you're setting a grid, first you want to set like margins, then you want to set your gutter, and then allow that to determine your column size. So here, I might start with margins of like, let's say 24 values. I would set my gutter at like 16. And then basically what this allows is my columns internally, they're allowed to stretch and flex on their own. So if I was to actually draw out some squares, you'll see that like how they're kind of generating that size. I would argue that like usually the iPhone is one of the most difficult to set up appropriately. And there's other ways to like generate those columns. But once you have those columns set up, you can begin to use it to kind of get a sense of how to begin to divvy up some of that space. And you can always kind of change these values. So if I want to change my margin back down to 20, I can easily do that. And I can basically use that to get a sense of how I am mocking up that content. But once again, what I was mentioning before is that what's really cool about Figma is that it gives you the opportunity to apply like both a vertical and a horizontal grid. So if I wanted to hop in here and add in my row set, let's say if you want to use a baseline grid. Now, a baseline grid is typically used to establish a nice vertical rhythm that helps you keep your objects like on an even pace and helps you set your vertical spacing when you're working in a design. So I can go here, I can choose my row count to be auto. I can choose it to generate from the top, and I can set it to be usually a value of 4 or 8 for clarity purposes, I'm going to choose 8, and I'm going to set like 0 on the gutter, or I can set 8 on the gutter to help you kind of see that visual style. You know, when you're working in this layout, one of the most common values to work off of is values of 8. So here I can kind of begin to generate the size. What's cool about the vertical rhythm is it helps you establish like that spacing between your elements. So here I know that my gutter on my column set is set to 16. And if this is set to 8, then I know that every 2 values is going to equate to like that gutter. So to hide, I'm going to press Shift G, right? And I can see that when I'm blocking out my text, I got this nice even gutter. So it can help me to establish and work on those wireframes as I'm beginning to develop this. And even if you want to, you could even kind of like work with like flush values or like a key line if you want to set that as well. Like I mentioned before, it's a lot to get into when you start really breaking down working with grids. I would highly recommend looking at Material Design's grid primer because I guarantee you it's going to give you a much greater understanding of depth than I'm able to provide here right now. Maybe you invite me back later and when I just talk about grids the whole time. Okay, cool. So we're like setting up at least a little bit of a wireframe here. How's everybody doing? One other cool thing about the grid that I set up is I can generate it as a style. So I can click style. I can create a new style and I can call it Mig's grid. And what's cool about that is that now every new frame that I generate, I can create another frame here. I can go to my layout grid style and boom, I have that grid already set up. So what I can do with this too is if I decide I want to make changes to it or I want to hide one of those stacked aspects of the grid, I can easily hide it and display it just like that. I'm going to talk a little bit about typography right now. Does anybody have any questions? Any questions? Cool. I could see y'all got some grids going. That's great. Remember too, in here, you can use cursor chat so you can say hi at any point. Hi. All right. So I'm going to talk a little bit about typography. What I'm going to do is I'm going to draw out a text box, right? And I'm going to paste in some text, or I'm just going to say a bunch of words. Let me see. Y'all got words? Here we go. Hi, everyone. Welcome. There you go. I got some text. No, one copy. There we go. So I got I got some text here. All right. So one thing that I'm going to talk about is so you draw in some text. Use the T key to draw text. All of the text properties are over here at the right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set up, let's say, like a header and then like some paragraph text. Header is going to be obviously a little bit larger. So this right here is a typographic scale. Typographic scale helps you be a little bit more choosy about the text that you're using. This way, you don't end up with text that is like, 17.5. Whenever you're working with text in Figma, especially in the layout, always be mindful of the different mode that it is in. So if text is auto width, it'll only be a line unless you have a hard break. If it's fixed, you'll actually see this like little window box. It's not expanding with the text. So in this case, I want text that is going to grow and expand. So I'm going to choose auto height. And what that means is that as the text expands, that little text field is going to grow with it. And I guarantee you that's going to be really important. So I'm going to select that text and I'm going to make it black. And I'm going to set the line height. And so the line height value is something that's really important when you're talking about establishing a baseline grid. So as long as it is divisible by your baseline grid size, our value is 8. So if I choose a line height that's going to be greater than 32 and then divisible by 8, then you should see that text will kind of work with it. So instead of 139%, I'm going to set that value to 40. And what's cool about that is you'll see that every single baseline will line up in my grid. So long as your line height is divisible by your baseline grid, every line will line up. So likewise here with this like body text, and normally people use a value of 4 for a baseline grid, right? Right now we're using 8, but like 4 is also okay. You'll just see the line up like in the middle of it. So what I'm going to do here at 16, if I type in, 24 as my line height, right? It's already set. You'll notice every other line matches up, right? Even as I expand this out, you'll see every line matches up. And that's kind of like the benefit of a baseline grid. So if I hide that, you can actually see that there's this kind of like underlying rhythm that's working with our text here. So next up, you could set those as styles. So I can click this little text styles. I can hit plus, and I can call this, Mig H1. I create that style. I can select this one. I can hit plus, and I could title this Mig, P is like my paragraph. And anytime I have like additional text and I want to change it to a style, I can just choose that other style and then roll with it, right? So then this will allow you to not have to worry about setting those values over and over and over again. All right, cool. So I'm going to hit Shift G. I'm going to bring this layout back. And I'm going to draw in like a little header image up here. How are we doing on time? Can I just get like a time check?
Yeah, so I think about like 20 more minutes would be good, and then we'll get started on the Q&A after that.
Perfect. Thank you. That's awesome. All right, so you'll see that I'm beginning to lay out like a simple page here, right? And let's say I want to use this shape to place an image. One thing that I'm going to highlight about working in Figma is that all images are just fills on shapes. So what I'm actually going to do here, I don't know if this is going to work. As I mentioned, I'm on a new computer. So let me just make sure that I have some images to place. Let me see. I'm going to hop on my Figma folder. Boom, boom, boom. Let's see. Random GIFs, presentations. I don't know if I brought over my images just yet. Yes. Nope. Okay, cool. So I'm going to have to wing it, but that's okay. All right. So I'm going to open up Chrome. I'm going to type in Unsplash. I'm going to download some images from Unsplash. Are y'all able to see my Unsplash window or no?
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay, that's fine. I didn't know if it's being captured by the share. All right, let me just download some images real quick. And so I went to unsplash.com. It's a great site for, downloading some images. Let me see if they've downloaded. Brilliant, they downloaded. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use that shortcut key that I highlighted before. So Command /. I'm going to type in place image, right? And you can see that this will highlight the shortcut key for me right here as well. So when I choose that, let me go to my downloads folder, and I downloaded a bunch of images. So here we go. I'm going to hold down the what is this? The option or command key. I'm going to select them all. So I've selected 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 images. I'm going to press open. Now, what I want to demonstrate here is that all images are just fills on images, or all images are just filled on shapes, So here, when I click, you'll see, okay, cool. Even on that star right there, right? So these images are just occupying those shapes. So if I was to, look at the shape and I scale it, the image is basically doing its best to render onto that space. So you don't necessarily have to worry about masks. Like we have masking in Figma, but any shape that you have, if you look over here, this is where the fill is, and this is how it's being applied. So even as I were to work on this space, and I'm going to take the opportunity to show y'all a little bit of auto layout. So right now, if I was to want to increase that image, right? So if I go and I'm like, oh, I want this image to be bigger, but now I have to move my text and I got to move this text, right? It could be a big pain in the butt. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all three of those items and I'm going to press Shift A. And now when I press Shift A, it's going to create an auto layout object. So basically it's a frame. It's kind of like containing them all. And you'll notice it kind of move this over and that's totally fine. So this auto layout frame, I can move this over here to the left. And actually, because I had a little bit of padding, I might change something up. Let me undo real quick and I'll show you how to deal with that as well. Because I have that padding, I might want these first few kind of brought into their own auto layout frame. So I'm going to select them both. I'm going to press Shift A. So they're in their own auto layout frame. And then I'm going to select this one with this. I'm going to press Shift A. So then now they're in their own auto layout frame. And what's cool about that is when I select and I command click this object that's inside of it, right, I can expand this out. And basically these other objects are going to keep that padding between it. And now you can actually click on that padding, right? So I can click on that and I can increase it. If I just click on it once, oh, let me see. If I click on it, I should be able to change it, but I think it's coming up here. So anytime you have an auto layout object, and it's good to kind of like name them over here on the right. So if I double click into this one, right, I can kind of change that. And I can also add to its padding. So let's say, you know, here I wanted to like add in additional spacing, or for this one, say this frame right here, I want to add an additional padding. I can begin to adjust that. All right. And auto layout works in a couple different ways. So when I select this object, you'll see that it's currently fixed, and fixed, it's determining the size of it. But let's show a simpler example. So if I create a little bit of text and I press Shift A for auto layout, it creates the auto layout frame around it. So here, if I click, if I command click, there's like a shortcut key not working. Well, I wonder if it's because I'm spotlighting. That's weird. I think they changed something on me. Okay, so what I can do is if I hold down Option and Shift, I can change all that padding together, right? And what this is cool is, what's cool about this is when I press the fill, I can set a background to it. And this text will grow that shape. And what that's really good for is for making buttons. So if I make a button, I select that frame, I can round out those corners, and I can name this as I wish. Right? And what's cool about this too, I can adjust that padding. So if I command click over here, I can increase that padding all at the same time. Or if I want to control them individually, I can control the top padding, bottom padding, right padding, or left padding. And what's really cool about this is this can be reused. You can make a button that you then want to reuse again and again, right? So what I can do is create a component. So I'm going to create a component, and you'll see it's called frame 22. And what a component is something that's fundamentally reusable, right? You can use it again and again. So what you do is you create instances of it. So I'm going to call this my button component, and I'm going to say Mig button component. And so whenever you duplicate, these are all then become instances, and you can override aspects of it. So I could say home, I could say portfolio, I could say, you know, what's another thing? Home, portfolio, about me, right? I'm working on my portfolio. And now anything at the main component, I could begin to change, right? So let's say I want to change that spacing. I can increase that spacing, and it increases on them all. I can select, I'm command clicking on it, by the way, and add in a stroke value, and it's then kind of growing on all of those. So what's really cool about this is that these components, these auto layout components, can be also put inside of an auto layout. So let's say if I select all three of these, I can select them all together, and press Shift A. And now they are in their own auto layout frame that can also be kind of like adjusted. So I can increase the spacing between these. I could choose them to go vertical. I could choose them to go horizontal. I could even have negative spacing here as well. So I can have, there's somebody's thing is on. All right, so I can have negative spacing as well, like if I want to stack those. So one other cool thing about this is that as I'm working on this layout, I could even hit left or right to make it go left or right. So, you know, let's say I want to make that text be much smaller. And like, let's say these buttons are, you know, part of my navigation, right? I could just bring this all down and like kind of move that up there. All right, cool. So that's just a few basics with layout as we're kind of working on these things, right? And there's so much more that I can get into that I don't necessarily have to cover with that. So what I'm going to do is just kind of dig right into a little bit of prototyping. I'm going to have y'all work on a quick prototyping activity with me. Now, what prototyping is basically just a way that allow you to mimic some of the interactions that you might encounter when testing out a mobile prototype, when testing out a website, right? And that's what I'm trying to get at, is that it's meant to kind of like test some of these ideas. So it always is going to take place over multiple frames. So I'm going to draw out a frame here. And let's just have like a very simple small frame. So I'm going to call this, you know, Mig start. And in this frame, I'm going to create a just like a little circle. Right. And basically, this is the starting point. And think of this as like a wireframe. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this. And then I'm going to have, you know, Mig end. Right. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to expand this and have it go like the full size. So, you know, we're basically starting and we're ending. And I mentioned before prototype mode. So I'm going to press Shift E and you'll see that we are now in prototype mode. So what this is going to allow me to do is when I hover over these elements, right, I can now create this kind of like relationship between them. So if you even think of this button being a button, right, and let's also have it be on this next page, and let's have it move out of the way. Just going to hold and move it out of the way. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create an interaction. So when I click on this, right, and you get these details for the interaction. So I'll show you that one more time. Right, so I'm in prototype mode. I'll press Shift E, I'm in prototype mode. I select this button, I drag an interaction. It's going to have these interaction details. So these interaction details, let me see if I'll make this a little bit bigger. No, is it going to let me make it bigger? Nope. Okay, so I have these interaction details here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, let's say on click, it's going to navigate to, right? And it has a number of different options as well. So it can scroll to, it can swap and overlay, it can open and overlay. 9 times out of 10, you're going to use navigate to. We're going to go to Mig end, and then we can choose how that journey happens. So I could either have it crossfade, or I'm going to choose smart animate. There's a number of different other options here too that you can typically use with prototyping that kind of reference the way that you might navigate a space on a mobile phone. I'm just going to choose smart animate. Here we actually have a number of different ways to kind of create that motion. I'm going to choose a custom Bezier and make it be an ease in, ease out. So the thing I'll show y'all is that the majority of interactions that you will make as an interaction designer are going to be some form of this S shape, right? Like an ease in, ease out. And the reason is because an object is going to gain speed and then it's going to slow down. So if it's going from one point to the next point, you're going to see a gain speed, you're going to slow down. So sometimes you gain speed a little bit quicker, sometimes you slow down a little bit quicker, and that's represented by this graph. So this is the speed up and this is the slow down. And let's choose a duration for that. Because I'm just sharing this over Zoom, I'm just going to put about 450 milliseconds. And what I'm going to do here as well is I'm going to have it when you click, it'll navigate back and you'll actually see like the smart animate, the ease in out is all maintained. So very quickly, I'm going to click the play button. You too can click on the play button and you will see the the flow. So here we go with you. There's actually a couple flows generated. So it's flow 2. When I click that button, you see that it plays. And then when I click on the gray, it goes back out. So you've created a very simple interaction here. And not all interactions need to be Smart Animate. I'm just kind of skipping ahead to Smart Animate because it's kind of like the most impressive one, and it's great for micro interactions. But even here, if I go and I change some of these properties, as long as your layers are named correctly across your frames, and as long as the layers are being maintained, then it can transition well. You can only change properties like scale, rotation, position, and color. A lot of other kind of like custom, vector shapes isn't going to transition well. So here, I'm going to go from this frame to this frame. Let's go to prototype mode. Here's my flow 2. I'm going to rename this to Mig's flow. And when I hit that play button, you see it kind of going there and then back. And the reason the motion looks so good is because we're using that ease in out motion. That's going to be a very kind of complementary motion to the way that your eyes are going to expect things to move. We also have in here custom spring animations. Once again, I mentioned that many things are going to look like this little S curve. So this one overshoots just a little bit, and I can select this interaction going back, and it's right up here. And I can do the same thing where I choose that custom spring, and then let's make that spring a little bit more springy. Right, there we go. Can make it more springy. There we go. And we can actually play that and see how that plays right there. Go to Mig's flow, hit play. And what's really cool about this is that, let's say Holly, right? If I click on Holly, I'm following Holly wherever Holly is currently, right? So Holly, if you click on Mig's flow, right? I'm going to put my hands up. Let's see, Holly, if you're listening. If you click on Mig's flow, I can actually see you interact with that prototype. Does anybody else want to like click on prototype mode for me and follow along? All right, let's see. Brianna, I'm following you. There we go. I'm following Brianna. Brianna, see, I see your cursor. There it is. All right, click on the button. Boom, you did the button. All right, click on the red again, and it goes back. See, so this is actually how we perform user testing, right? We'll create a prototype, we share the link, and we can actually watch people interacting with it, which is kind of great. So if you are, you create like a series of frames, so like, let's just say, like red box, right? And then like here, it can make it, like big, it shows the concept, and then you click again, and then it like, zooms back out to this like little box, right? Think of it as like wireframing in the same way, where I can like do this prototype, I click there, it goes to that next slide. I click here, it goes to that next slide, and then I click there and it goes back. And there's a number of different ways that you can really dig in here. So let's go into, where's that flow? Did I just break it? I think I broke it. Wow, look at that. Let's click on flow 4. Yeah, I think I just broke prototyping in Figma. Go me. All right, let's see. So I click on that. There we go. Now it's back, right? So it's like I'm clicking and it's going through those 4 different states. This becomes really powerful when, you start using it for more robust prototypes. And I can share some with you as well. Let me go to the community. I'm going to type in, let's see, mobile prototype. Let's see if I can find it myself. Let's go to creators. Let me find my. So one thing that I would highly recommend is that you go into the community and you find other people's files. So I'm going to go ahead here. Let's see. I'm going to duplicate this one. And so here I can actually take a look at this prototype. And if you watch my share screen, you can see it, right? So this is just like a simple prototype. I like to make these like kind of like abstract examples as like really good like lean-ins to how this works. But also, let's see if I go back into the community and we look at something like the mobile prototype. What I'll do is I'll just nest this in here so y'all can play with it. But I'm going to duplicate this and I'll give you all access. Let me move it to a project. Let's move it to our project. Here we go. And I'm going to share this with you all. Let me just make sure that anyone with the link can edit. I'm going to copy that link and let's share it to everyone. And so this is like another prototype that you can actually walk through. So here I have like a scrolling frame. I can click on that frame and I can click like a whole article. So prototypes don't have to be massive. They are, they can be fairly simple in their construction. There's a lot to it. I guarantee you I can probably talk for about 8 hours on building prototypes. I would also check out Figma's YouTube for like, digging deeper into making some of these prototypes. I'm going to go ahead. Let's find this nested globe one. And I will going to throw that into another page. Right. So I have the nested globe. So if you actually follow me, if you're in this secondary file, you can see where the second kind of graphic is. But yeah, definitely look for like other people's examples. This is like a really good way to kind of dig in and play with things. So feel free, like if you like these files, you can go ahead, you could duplicate them into your drafts. So then you can have your own copy and that you can kind of begin to play around with those. Cool. Are we just about at time for questions, or I can show one or two more things?
I think we're almost at time for questions. I think like a few more minutes would be okay.
So a few more minutes?
Yeah, so like 3 to 5 minutes maybe. Yeah.
All right, cool. I'll do 3 to 5 minutes. Yeah, it's a lot to cover. All right, cool. So let's go back over to our Figma fundamentals. Okay, and I'm going to show y'all like one or two more things. So if you remembered that I brought up the components, right? So oftentimes what people do is they'll generate like a card. So if you're thinking about something like a common like UI card design, what they might do is they might build something like this, right? So I have a header image. Let me grab these three things. Grab that, and I'll take it and I'll paste them right here. So I just have these three things, right? So 1, 2, 3. And what they'll do is they'll make like a card design out of that, right? So I'm going to select all three. I'm going to press Shift A. That puts them into the auto layout. The auto layout is going to give me these properties over here. I can change the spacing between those. I can give them a fill color. And I can command click right here and I can give it padding. So I can say like 24 padding. Let's put a stroke around everything so you can kind of see it. So this is like one of the most common kind of like use cases for like auto layout. And in constructing this card, what I might do is try to make it like flexible or responsive. So what I do is for each one of these elements, right, I will set their properties, how they resize over here. So run this one, I'll say I want it to fill the container, right? Likewise with this, I'm going to choose this to fill the container. Likewise with this one, I'm going to choose this one to fill the container. So with all three of these internal elements set to fill container, what they do is they kind of like grow and they contract with the size of that card. And this is one of those benefits of auto layout. So you'll notice that the sizing here, it says 409 and hug. So the width is being determined by the card, whereas the height is determined by the hug. So as I paste in more text, right, the card will grow, right? As I remove text, right, the card shrinks. So the nature of auto layout is to be responsive, but something needs to kind of like hold that value, right? So what they're going to do next is when you have something that's built this way, that is kind of flexible and responsive the way that you want it, and you want to build it for like a library, you select it. I'm going to make it into a component. Let's name this our card component. right? And what's cool about this is that once you have an instance, you can begin to change these values. So like I can add in like a, like a different image, and I can change that image. I could change this title. I could change this text, right? And this card grows and responds to it. I could even change some of the colors, right? But the internal kind of core components of it remain the same. Now, the cool thing that we have now in Figma is called component properties, which allow us to create a property that is associated with it in the same way that a developer may work with it. So I can select this text field. I can click right here and I can say header text, and I create that property. I can select this text and create a new property, and I can call this, body text, and I create that property. And now when I select this component over here, those two values, I don't have to go in here and edit it. I can just go over here to the right and say, hello world, right? And it changes it right there, body text. I can just say, hello, and it changes it right there. So what you're fundamentally doing is now kind of creating variables that can be used to kind of like change this text. And you could even set up other properties such as a Boolean property. Let me add one more. I'm going to say Boolean. So I'm going to set the value true, or I'm going to call this card visible. And now when I go to the card, I could set the that property, that card visible. I didn't even name it right because I'm a terrible speller. Let's make sure this is named right, card visible. So now I can basically set it as being false, and now it hides. So if I go to this card, I can just turn a little switch and it goes on and off, right? So I can go here, on and off, on and off. So as the main designer, I design these components that can then get reused. And then, you develop these properties that can then be used to kind of like control them out in the wild. And what's really cool is, you generate these and you put them into a layout, right? And you could put them into like an auto layout kind of thing where you then control its spacing. So it's that whole notion of atomic design where, you have molecules all the way up to like, you start like the base atoms, then you kind of move up to molecules. So, like the text components like an atom, then it kind of builds larger and larger to like the organisms. Cool. All right. Sorry if I went really fast at the end. I just wanted y'all to see, some of the potential here when working on a layout. Then here, one last thing. Let's say I have a layout grid and I have my columns and I have 12 columns. Let me set in here too that I have a margin. So let's have a margin of like 48. Margin on the outside. I can put this card in here and I could set this card to have left and right constraints. And what that means is that once this card is set inside of this grid, now when I grow and shrink this whole grid, they'll also follow suit. So they each have left and right constraints that then tell them how to behave. So when I resize this, right, they kind of grow and shrink. So even if I hide that grid, right, those elements are now constrained in here. And because that width is set to fill container, and because those cards are set to hug their contents, they will flex and be responsive in a way that, they might not be in a typical design application. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for running through that Figma demo. In that case, we can get started on the Q&A session. I think someone actually asked the question on how to make responsive designs. So that's one question answered already. But yeah, thank you for sharing some of the many things that we can do on Figma. We'll get started on the Q&A session via the Slido link. I think, Brianna, if you could share your screen. Yep, thank you. So yeah, we'll just get started. Please use the link that will be soon sent into the chat, or you can also scan the QR code on the screen to ask your questions. We do have a few questions already. Unfortunately, we probably won't be able to go through every question just due to time constraints, but we'll go through the top few until we run out of time. So we'll just get started. The first question we have is, so what are some of the top UI trends that you have used or have seen circling around recently?
UI trends. I would say that like I don't necessarily follow trends, like I mean, I try to think about like core kind of like tenants and properties and like procedures. Like I mean, for that, I'll say that there's like a lot of things that are pretty like cyclical in how they go. But I mean, what I would say is like as a UI designer, you should be comfortable with design patterns and like how people use things. I would stay away from trends because trends get dated pretty quickly. Like I remember I once had a student that like made this like whole neomorphic design. It's like neomorphism, and like with neomorphism, what it does is it's like it's not even like a real trend where like it kind of takes the concept of like in what is it, plastic vacuum forming. I don't know if y'all know what I'm talking about, but a couple years ago, like everybody was making these speculative designs in like neomorphic style, and I'm like, what is this addressing, right? Like how is this helpful for anybody? Is it communicative? Does it make sense? Like when it comes to UI design, it's like, obvious is always going to be better than clever. Understanding the ways that people work, understanding and being familiar with like existing patterns that are successful. Being mindful of like your audience, doing a lot of user research, right? Like, and like as a student, it's difficult to do user research because you don't necessarily have users, but just being aware and dissecting how things are. I mean, I see a lot of like case studies, like people generating these very large case studies, but a lot of people don't ask why, right? It's like, what are you really communicating? And I've always had this thing, I actually give a presentation on it where it's like, are you just mimicking something, or are you actually like engaging in process and understanding like why you're doing the thing? Like I would see a lot of portfolios that would like list out like, I'm using Roboto, and then like using like putting the entire Roboto alphabet as part of their portfolio. And I'm like, why is that in there? Did you design Roboto? They're like, no. They're like, well, I'm using the font. I'm like, everybody knows what Roboto looks like. You're like wasting space. You're wasting download. Like it doesn't do anything to serve the purpose, right? So the thing that I would say is like, don't look at trends and instead like question why something is trending, right? Like, is it valuable? Is it adding anything? Is it process driven? Like the one thing that I hate is like when people put in a portfolio like all of these designs, like you fill up the page with designs and you put them at like a 3/4 view, right? And it's like, well, what are you saying with that, right? Like what am I meant as a user, as a recruiter, as someone? It's like, what is it communicating? Does it communicate well? Or are you just trying to hide your design? You're trying to make it look pretty for the sake of making it look pretty. So what I would just say is like, don't follow trends, follow patterns, identify patterns. When you see something is trending, ask yourself why. When you see a designer doing something, ask yourself why. What is it communicating? Is it being successful? Is this something that would genuinely be implemented? Or is it just trying to be clever when in reality, like you just need to be obvious? And those are tenets that, like in my like 23-year career, like have always stayed true,
Yeah, that's definitely a really interesting and good take on that. I feel like yeah, even personally, like trends are really easy to just like jump on and follow like without thinking about it too much. So yeah, definitely a really interesting take. All right, the next question we have is there a website builder that you would recommend to translate a Figma design prototype to a fully functioning website?
So, I mean, I have my own opinions on that. Like, I've usually developed a lot of things using like simple frameworks, but I do have a little bit more coding chops. So like I would use like a static site generator. Like I used to use Jekyll all the time just because like I would like to like code up my own sites. Um, what I would say is that whatever you use, make sure that it's performant. I know you're looking for like a different answer to this, but like, like if you're using Webflow, if you're using Simplest, like try to find the thing that is going to generate the best code. There's never going to be a perfect code generator to like perfect design. Like it's just never going to happen. Like the best way that a design is going to be translated well is if there's like a human behind it. Um, and then also maybe it's like my bias because it's like I've never seen that done well. I think that Webflow does it the best in terms of like being able to go in because you're actually modifying the properties in the way that they're going to be expressed. What I would say is that like even when you're building out a design, like if you're building out a design from Figma to Webflow, like break it down in components. Don't get all the way to the point where your design is like finished and it's perfect, right? Like do a little bit and then do a little bit, right? Like get the idea of it and then like establish it in code. If you're working with a developer, like there's like an entirely different flow that you're going to work from, but you have to stop thinking of things as being linear. Like I'm not going to design my website in Figma and then it's going to be perfect. And then I'm going to go design it in Webflow. Like there's going to be some back and forth. You're going to make some assets and you're going to make some color decisions. You're going to make some composition decisions in Figma that it is easier to make in Figma at the time. And then you're going to try to translate them as best as you can in something like Webflow or like some other kind of generator. But the one thing that I would say is that, make sure you're using the inspect on with Google Chrome and check to see how heavy your website is. If you have very heavy images, if you have very heavy videos, they're going to bog down your site. And chances are, if you're sharing your site and it looks fine to you because it's already in cache, but you're sharing your site and you're not getting any responses, there's a good chance that no one's ever actually loaded up your entire site because the images are bogging it down so much. You have to remember, like sometimes people reviewing websites like are like doing so from like a cafe, and they're not going to have the best Wi-Fi. So the site that is more performant and that loads quickly is going to be more successful. I've worked with students before. Like I had a student that had like all this stuff that showed up that like added to their page, and it was beautiful. And she was like, nobody's responding to me. Why? And then I loaded up. Her homepage was like over like 50 megabytes on initial load. That was before I even started scrolling. And I was like, no one's actually seeing your site. Like no one's looking at it because they can't. They load it up. They think it's broken. They leave. You have like 3 minutes, and that's the thing. It's like I feel like as a designer and trying to get their portfolio noticed, they're trying to throw everything into it. And as a recruiter looking at a site, they just need the things that they need to make a decision as quickly as possible. So I feel like really understanding the perspective of the reviewer will help you make a better site. And I'm thinking portfolio site. Yeah, you probably didn't say portfolio site. I'm imagining portfolio site, but any site in general, right? It's like you need to think of like what is the proposition of like the stakeholders versus like the developer, like what are you trying to accomplish versus what they're trying to accomplish when you're making something. So when choosing like a site builder, if it's for your portfolio or for like work that you're doing, just make sure that whatever it is you're doing, you're aware of how performant it is, and how the code is translating, and how it shows up on many different devices, because that's going to impact the experience of the reviewer.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that insight. So this is like a bit of a follow-up question. But the next question that was asked is it possible to translate Figma designs or prototypes into code?
There's like a ton of like code builders, right? Like, but So like there's going to be there was like a Figma to React like kind of generator. I know like people are building these things all the times. Some of them are like um behind like paywalls. Um but what I would say is that like you need to there's never going to be anything that's perfect, right? There's never going to be anything that's just like, I made it in Figma, I push one button, it's going to be perfectly made. Like there's like, what is it, like Bravo Studio, it'll make like an app for you. There's going to be, what is it, like I saw maker.me. I don't know if that's like available to just anyone. Like maker.me has a full integration with Figma that'll generate a responsive website that's based off of Figma. But like even then, there's going to be caveats in with regards to like what your intent is and what the code's intent is going to be. And I feel like there's never going to be like a 100% alignment on those two things. I think that like as Figma's tools mature and as like other web tools and like React components, all those things kind of mature, there's going to be a middle ground, but you're then going to have to learn the way that those components then translate into code. Like even like when you're working in like Figma and you're looking at the inspect panel, it might not be the most optimized way. It might not necessarily be the intent of you as the designer in the way that it should be coded. So I was talking about kind of like performance and optimization. The performance and optimization is always going to be had at the helm of like the coder. And in working together with a designer to like render that intent as correctly as possible, because otherwise, I mean, there's always going to be there's always going to be some kind of assumption that's made, and the computer is going to make an assumption, the code's going to make an assumption, and it might not render the intent as perfectly as it can be. I mean, the short answer is like, there's nothing is going to be perfect, right? And it's never going to be perfect. Like I'm going to argue that there's always going to be something that is going to be, you're going to need to go in and manually adjust. But yeah, there's like plenty of plugins and stuff. If you just search, you'll find them, and you're going to find them all to be faulty, and they're all going to be out of date a year later. And then there'll be like another slew of people coming in with their like design to code converters, and they're also going to be slightly faulty and not quite work. So some might do the job, but and I'm trying not to be like pessimistic here. It's just kind of like knowing what's under the hood. When you add that extra layer, it adds so much unnecessary complexity, and then it kind of like bogs down like the systems. And sometimes, it's like you want it to do one thing, but it doesn't know everything that you want it to do. So it's always going to be difficult.
Yeah, thank you for your answer. I'll ask one more quick question. So the last question is just, what opportunities are there for me to engage with Figma again? For example, future workshops, internships, or events?
Oh yeah, check out figma.com/events. We're always throwing events. And we just opened up like 2 more offices. We have an office in Berlin, and we have an office in France. We have an office in Tokyo. So there should be like events that will be happening and propagating like in your timelines as well. As a Figma educator, I usually run like an event once a month. If you check out our YouTube as well, we had a breaking into design live stream, or hosted by a bunch of recent graduates that now are working at like Google, Square, Grammarly, and a couple of other companies that gave advice on interviewing, portfolio, internships, and things like that. So for past events, check out youtube.com/Figma design. For future events, check out figma.com/events. And also, I mean, you can always reach out to me directly. So just at Miggie, Miggi on Twitter, or education@figma.com. So like I'm always open to doing like future events. I try to like be a little bit more specific to, or like, focus on like, more concentrated things. So I know I covered a lot today, but like sometimes I'll spend like an entire 2 hours on auto layout, just that concept. I like to do deep dives, or, we'll do something like presenting in Figma. So yeah, I would say figma.com/events is probably the place to go to see all of our current live stream lineups, and then youtube.com/figma design to see all the follow-ups. They all get recorded and placed on there after the fact.
Yeah, sounds good. I know I'll be checking them out after the event as well. Cool. So those are all the questions we have time for today. We hope that everyone here that you enjoyed learning about Figma and the many ways that you can develop your UI design skills with the tool. And we hope that you have learned a lot from this session and can take inspiration to use Figma to bridge your knowledge from uni to the professional field and propel your career from using Figma to create your portfolio or UI mockups for any project you may encounter. Thank you so much to Miggie for taking the time out of your busy schedule to help us learn more about Figma, and I'm sure we all learned a lot of valuable lessons from listening to all of your tips and tricks. All right, before we wrap up, we would also love to take just a quick photo or screenshot of everyone here. So if we could everyone please turn on their cameras? I'll give it a bit of time just so everyone can hopefully turn on their cameras, please. Brianna, would you be able to take the photo? All right. Cool. Hi, everyone. If not, that's also okay. It is quite early over here, so that's all good. But we'll just take a screenshot for keepsake as well. So Brie, just let us know when you're ready.
3, 2, 1, smile.
All right, I'm guessing that's done. Thank you so much. And also DigiSoc and WIT always aim to improve our events as much as we can. So we would also greatly appreciate any feedback from today's event. If you could fill out our feedback form that will soon be linked into the Zoom chat, and also the QR codes on the screen, that would be really appreciated. In that case, that concludes our event for this morning, and we'll stop the recording here. Once again, thank you so much everyone for attending, and we hope you enjoy your day.